Welcome to Leading Beyond Limits, the podcast where we explore the extraordinary journeys and insights of remarkable leaders who have pushed the boundaries of what's possible. Your host, Angel Radcliffe, who is a digital transformation leader, author, speaker, and financial educator, will lead each episode and dive deep into the stories, strategies, and philosophies that have empowered these exceptional individuals to lead, inspire, and achieve beyond the ordinary. We're about to embark on a journey of discovery and inspiration, and together, we'll learn what it takes to lead beyond limits. So grab your cape, or at least your favorite coffee mug, because we're about to unravel the extraordinary tales of trailblazers who've turned impossible into I'm possible. Let's get started.
Craig, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Angel. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you very much.
I am super excited to have you on and discuss leadership. It's one of my favorite topics and delve into some of the things that you have going on. I know you have a new book, new author, you have some amazing insights to share with us around business and leadership. But before we get started, how about you tell us a little bit more about you and your upbringing and how you have come to where you are today?
Sure. So I actually was fortunate enough to grow up in an entrepreneurial family, a small business family. My mother had a small restaurant, about 14 tables or so. And I started washing dishes when I was 10 years old. And then I became a busboy at 13, and then a waiter at 16, and until I was about 21 or so. During that time period, they also had a small construction company for designing, installing, and maintaining automatic fire sprinkler systems. And right around 16, I started working in the shop as well. So fabricating and cutting pipe. And sometimes I'd go out in the field. It's pretty hard manual labor. That pipe is super heavy and it gets super hot. But it's good. It was good for me, good character building. And so I would go back and forth between working at those two places, of course, with school and everything. But it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Especially the restaurant really taught me a lot about being organized and efficient, communicating, sales, teamwork. There's handling stress and pressure. There are so many lessons that I learned from that. And then I went to Cal Poly Pomona. I was a business major, a major in operations and management and a minor in marketing. And a couple of years after graduating, I was still working with my parents, but I had been studying the internet, getting familiar with it, jumping online through American Online at the time. So I'm dating myself here because it goes way back when, and 14.4 modems and everything was super slow. Interesting times. And came up with an idea to create a new type of business. So I started an online business with a couple of friends from college, actually, in 1996. And it was focused on marketing independent music online. It was like a fight the establishment type of thing. So people could discover independent artists and listen to song samples and buy their CDs online through a secure server all the way back in 1996. But yeah, there's a lot of challenges there. It was an idea before its time. No broadband, no MP3s. There's only 30 million people worldwide online at the time. So we ended up having to adapt our business model and started working with companies and evolved into this interactive digital agency, grew it, sold it 19, and stayed on as CEO for a few years. And then when I left, I took the rest of the year to relax. And then just at the start of last year, I started my whole new chapter. Spent a little time defining that. And so here I am. And yeah, just came out with a new book, Business Kung Fu, doing consulting work. And there's another very interesting thing that I do. It's called Chinese energy medicine, or Chinese medical Qigong, which was a game changer in helping me run my business, which we may touch on. But I finish up with that program in August. I've actually been practicing for 9 years, the past 9 years on that. But yeah, so I do a number of things. So that's the quick summary.
We have a lot in common. Before the show, I gave you a little bit of what I do. So master of all trades, Jane of all trades, and jack of all trades. I have so many questions, and I was sitting here and you were talking about the 90s and AOL, and I grew up during that time frame, and I just remember my mom trying to connect to the internet, and all you heard was that shh.
You're right. Yeah, and you had to make sure no one else was on the phone, or you had to make sure that no one was going to use the phone so you can, be online for an hour or whatever. Yeah, yeah,
Those
yeah.
were the days definitely before what we have now. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you've had so many experiences in running a business. And most people that I come across are fairly new entrepreneurs, but it sounds you said you grew up in a family that was entrepreneurial. So I take it that you already had all of this amazing knowledge, and maybe that was like your passion versus sitting at a corporate job. I know most people say corporate is not for them or they were born to run a business. Have you felt that way?
Yes, I would say the earliest I probably realized that was when I was around 17 or 18, knowing that I wanted to start a business, my own business one day. I just didn't know what it would be. But that's the earliest I can remember really feeling strongly about that. And it just felt natural to me, again, growing up in that environment. I was just so fortunate that I had that upbringing.
So thinking about when you first became an entrepreneur, we know like the first 2 years are the toughest. Many times, like the first 2 years in businesses, they're not really generating a profit. And if you can think back to those first few years in business, what was it like for you?
Oh yeah. It was a big challenge. Actually, the first 5 years was brutal. It we really had limited resources. We each had $1,300 that we put in a computer, and that's how we funded the company. And it was a struggle getting things moving. And at the time, as I was coming out of my parents' business, the recession in the early 90s really hurt them bad. The restaurant had to close. And then the construction company really dwindled down to just a bare minimum of work. And it was just a very interesting time coming out of that and then going into business with very limited resources. And it was just really grinding, no funding. And the internet was brand new. It wasn't like there was this big network of people that you can tap and get into. But looking back, there's a lot of mistakes that we made that we could have expedited things. But it was more of a kind of an old fashioned, slow managed growth and grind. And especially the first 5 years was really tough. Just a massive amount of hours, no vacations, working holidays nonstop. Just, yeah, it was interesting.
And you talked about no funding, limited resources. And I know this was, yeah, sounds like 20, 30 years ago, but there are business owners now who are still facing those challenges, like trying to start a business. They don't have capital, they don't have any sort of money to help them. And many people are bootstrapping their business. Now, with what you're doing now, you went through a series of some different opportunities. Do you feel like you still face those challenges in your current business?
No, it's much different today. I'm comfortable. However, it's not, I don't have those concerns because they're to a certain extent. As far as what's the time horizon look like, how much time do I have? Also, like a shift in priorities at this stage of my life. Yeah, I'm 53 and I still have a couple kids here at home. Yeah, there's a lot of sacrifices that had to be made as I was growing the business. And yeah, I want to make sure that my priorities are kept right, which we may get to. There was a big health challenge that I had to overcome because I was so all in with my company.
No, that's definitely understandable. And I know everyone wants to have a business or have something they can fall back on so they're not relying on the typical 9 to 5. And I know as you're getting older, you sometimes you feel a little bit more secure. You've made better financial decisions, and it's easier to step away and do something that you love or have a passion. And myself being involved in financial literacy and working with consumers and small business owners, I know there are more than 80% of small businesses that fail in the first 2 years. Looking
Mhm.
back solely in any of the businesses that you ran and you were a part of, did you feel as though you wanted to walk away and run back to a 9 to 5 job? And you're like, wait a minute, I'm working too hard. I can have a steady paycheck. Because yeah, the saying goes is that we work more in our business than we do for the 8 hour typical day job. You have a
Oh
business
yeah.
working sometimes overnight until midnight. You're doing 12 to 16-hour days. Like,
Yeah.
did you ever feel that?
Oh, absolutely. Especially those first 5 years. It was just so tough at times, just dealing with a lack of progress. We're not really making much money, working 80 to 90 hours a week. Again, no vacations, working on holidays, just nonstop. And I had a lot of friends. I started the company when I was 25. The fortunate thing is I didn't have a family established, so I had that time to myself to be able to dedicate towards that. But yeah, at the time it was a challenge seeing a lot of my friends who had started their careers and they were doing well and having all kinds of fun. And mentally it was a challenge to deal with. That was one of the challenges. And there's a few times I came very close to quitting. One time in particular that I was just seconds away from quitting. It was past midnight, working away, coding and designing. And it was very cold in my office because I shared an office with my parents' fire sprinkler company. It was an industrial space. And there was like a small little office and then the warehouse. And so about a quarter of the warehouse we partitioned off to extend the production area. It would get super cold and super hot in there. And it would happen to be the winter and it was super cold. And it was past midnight. I'm freezing because it's like 45 degrees in there. And I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm stupid. What the heck am I doing here? I'm going nowhere. And feeling just despair, really. And it was very interesting. And I write about this in my book. I share this story. And I have a model called the 5 elements of entrepreneurship. The 5th element is faith. And this is where faith gets you through these times. And it's a very interesting moment where there is providence, divine guidance that came in. I just decided to check my email as I was seconds away from just calling it quits. And I received an email from a provider. And he talks about it's like an update and hey everyone, thanks for all your support over the years. Just wanting to let you know, I just sold my company. I was so close to quitting so many times, but now I'm just angling to see when my next vacation is going to be, blah, blah, blah. He went on. That email came right at the time that I needed it, and it got me through that night. And then the next day I came in and I just had hope for the future. It's interesting, but that faith in yourself and also a higher power is extremely important to get through those times.
Oh, definitely. And I know you mentioned family like quite a few times. And even when you are in the corporate setting, there's so many times where there's like some trade-offs and challenges to really move forward, and you have a family at home. And I come across people who decline being promoted or they don't want to be promoted because it's more responsibility. Now, with having a business, I know that there's probably been like some trade-offs and some things that you've had
Oh
to
yeah.
do to make it work with your family. But I would like to understand what has worked well for you in balancing entrepreneurship and family. And this is a two-part question. Do you believe in work-life balance?
Yeah, that's very good question. So there's many times where I had to sacrifice time with my family just because when duty calls, like you said, in the corporate environment, someone could say decline the promotion, but when you have clients that are paying you for a job and if you don't deliver, there's going to create bigger problems, especially for your livelihood and how you support your family. There is no turning things down. You just have to do it. And so there's a number of things that I missed out on, but I did do my best to make as much time as possible for them. The way I tried to balance it was I would work pretty late into the evening after spending some time with the kids, the wife, because after I'd get home from work. So I tried to get home at a decent time, have dinner, spend some time with them, and then start my second shift, which would go till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and then wake up early and go at it again. But that gets very unhealthy, which it led to another challenge that I came across. But there is a way to balance it once you really start to get some progress and getting some help and relinquishing some hats so everything's not on you. And as I was getting more help in the business with more hires, growing the company, I was able to make choices where I was able to spend the time with the family, still working very hard, but at least getting some time in. And the balance is important, and especially when it comes to your health. I have a saying, which I say in my book, you have to be of service to self so you can be of service to others for a lifetime. Because if you don't take care of yourself, then how are you going to really be sustainable and what you have to do for your clients and your family both? So that's where it starts. I do believe in the work-life balance because when you have to take care of yourself. and then you can take care of everybody else. And then there's those other balance points as well.
I love it. It's almost like there's a meme that goes around online and it says that you have to fill your cup before you can fill everyone else's. And
That's right.
I love that. And coming back from being off, and of course, this is a busy week for so many people. If you're in the corporate setting, you come back and you have a million emails and you're trying to just sift through and get through. And I tell everyone, take time for yourself before you start feeding into other people, because you'd be amazed at how many people don't necessarily have that emotional intelligence to say, wait a minute, this person was off work for 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe I shouldn't be bugging them with things that aren't work related or whatever it is. But
Right.
even if you're an entrepreneur, I know some people have shifts of ups and downs of like when their business is good, when it's down, and depending on what the business is, there may be like downtime around the holidays and trying to get ramped back up in January. It's like you have to focus. You have to get focused so you can get things going, and you may not have the time, and you have to really just work on you and the things that you are prioritizing in your life before you start prioritizing everyone else.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot to manage. Planning for the business, planning for your personal life, all the responsibilities and obligations that you have in your personal life, but also for the business, because all the people that work for you depend on you and their families depend on you. That was always a conscious thought I had in my mind that, weighed heavily on me. Yeah, I'm not just responsible for the people in this office, it's their families as well.
Oh, definitely. And I want to shift gears here because I know we've talked about a little bit about some of your journey and some of the things that have worked well and things that you've overcome, but I want to hear more about your biggest achievements that you've seen throughout your business over the years. You can share some with us.
Sure. One big thing was that we were on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing private companies 5 years in a row. And from my understanding, at least at the time, only 7% of companies that get on the list achieve that feat, getting 5 years in a row. At the same time, another achievement was that we won best places to work and top places to work from a couple of those organizations that conduct those surveys 4 years in a row. And we actually stopped applying. That was important because from a leadership perspective, I didn't like the old-fashioned lead by fear model. I took a much more heart-centered approach and wanted to create a great work environment, a great brand culture. And that was super important. And it showed by us winning those awards. So that was big. Also, in 2009, we did a major achievement by buying our own commercial office space, which was a wonderful move for us. And that was at the height of the credit crunch in the spring of 2009 when no one was lending. And we were able to actually get 100% financing, nothing out of our own pocket to get the building. And it was a great move, helped us have plenty of room to expand and control our expenses. But the real pinnacle was selling the company in 2019 to a world-class creative digital agency based out of New York City. It was really the capstone of achievement for running that company.
Wow. And I've seen those emails come across for the INC 5000. So that's amazing. 5 years in a row. You have to be doing something pretty great on that list and best places to work. Now, one thing I do want to ask, I know you talked about really having that passion like for your employees and their development and things of that nature, your company succeeding.
Yeah, stuff's important because it's really a great way to attract talent and then also retain talent. My company, we were a digital marketing agency, and the average lifespan of an employee in that industry was like 2 to 3 years. And we blew that out of the water. We had many people that were with us for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, that even some people that were with us for 15 years. Actually, I know our chief creative officer, he finally just left there last year. Sometimes he was there for 19 years. And that's because of the great culture that we created. And when people would leave, more than half of them would want to come back, actually. But we didn't take everybody back, only the ones that we really wanted back. So it's a big deal because a couple things. One, it saves money because recruiting, hiring replacements is very expensive. And then two, you get to create a lot of efficiencies and be more effective when you have a team that is coherent, know how to really get things done better together. So it's super important to build a strong brand culture.
I definitely agree. Definitely agree. But it sounds like you're doing some amazing things. So kudos to you. And I want to move forward and get into the book, Business Kung Fu, which is a very interesting title, by the way.
Thank
I'd
you.
love for you to tell us about your book. Tell us how the name came about. Like, I think that's the most interesting part here.
Yeah, it's a great place to start, actually. So, yes, Business Kung Fu, the concept behind it is really taking the principles and lessons I learned from studying Chinese Kung Fu, which I studied intensely from age 17 to 25. And the principles that I learned and how I approached working in my company, how I structured the company, my mindset with discipline and perseverance, having an integrated, complete fighting system. So it was really developing a company that was a complete integrated system of services rather than just like one trick pony. Like we only do this, right? It was like a much more of an integrated approach. So there's things like that. Also, the first chapter is all about laying the foundation because that's how you start with martial arts is building a foundation. And then upon that, everything else can come into play. So the first chapter is all about laying a foundation, building that foundation. And I have what's called the 5 elements of entrepreneurship model. And it's based on classic Chinese 5 element theory, which applies to martial arts, applies to medical systems, and also even spiritual systems. Those 5 elements in the traditional Chinese system are fire, earth, water, metal, and wood. And there's all these various attributes. And with the Qigong practice that I have, it goes very deep. That's a whole other topic. But so taking that and modeling that from an energetic perspective and from my experience and what I have observed over these decades of being in business, I came up with the 5 elements that I feel are essential for success for an entrepreneur or any actual business professional or any professional for that matter. And those elements start with passion. Passion leads to discipline, leads to expertise, which is expert skills. Expertise leads to confidence, and then confidence leads to faith, which we talked about faith a little bit earlier. And it's a generative cycle that builds and you increase your capacity of those elements, but it could also go to the other direction and it could be diminished if you lose the right mindset. And then there's all these other interrelationships where you can have like an influence on one element can have increased the capacity of one element, but then also if it's the wrong, for example, if someone is overconfident, just which leads to just arrogance and arrogant attitude, that can actually be detracting from discipline because people can then end up being like, I'm so good, I'm all that. Yeah, I really don't need to do that. And then and so the discipline is lost, which then ends up causing other problems. So that's a really important concept that I created. And I feel it's something I definitely want to share with people that can benefit as they look at how they approach their business. It's a mindset book, really, at the end of the day.
It's a very interesting framework. And I love how you incorporated your own 5 elements, but you base it off of those 5 elements of the Kung Fu martial arts. I don't even know if that's in the same category. I know it's two different, but you base it off of that framework and then really
Yes.
regenerate it from your own. If thinking about something that really pushed you to write this book, if you had to say one thing, what would that be?
Books were my first passion. As soon as I could read, that's all I did. And before I could even read, I was always shoving a book in front of my mom and saying, read. I always wanted to be read to. And then as soon as I could read, I always had a book in my face for years and years. I just always had a book. And it was my first passion. I have a whole bunch of passions, but it was my very first. And when I was around the same time when I knew I wanted to be my own owner of a business, I also had thought one day I would really like to write a book. I just didn't know what at the time. And then finally, I started this book 12 years ago. It took me 12 years to get it done, just too focused on the business. But yeah, I persevered and stuck with it and got it done. And I'm just so excited to deliver this and fulfill this dream that I had a long time ago that's based on my first passion.
And congratulations again. I know it takes a lot of dedication to actually write a book. And I know we talked
Thank
a
you.
little bit about that before the show. You mentioned your book made it to number 2 on Amazon. So that's amazing. I know it's a rush, it's a great feeling. You talked about your love for books growing up. So I have to ask you this question. What was your favorite genre of books?
I was never really into fiction books. I really liked nonfiction. And when I was a kid, I was always reading a lot more of like scientific books like planets, space, dinosaurs, nature, all kinds of just topics like that. Yeah, I read a little bit of fiction, but I was much more interested in reality. And then I got very into history as well, probably more as a teenager. Really loved history and reading about history. And it still fascinates me. Also, personal help, self-development, self-help, personal development. Probably around 17, 18, started reading in that genre as well. So there's a whole variety of genres, but it's really vast majority is nonfiction. Probably 98% of it is nonfiction.
Interesting. And I have to ask this question as well. I have a lot of commentary, but I want to get to what people want to hear. Who is your favorite author, or do you have one?
Yeah, that's a great question. An author that had a really big impact on me was Robert Kiyosaki with his Rich Dad, Poor Dad series. When I read that book, I think it was around 2003, 2004, somewhere around there. I just loved how he wrote it. It was just a great read. It was simple, easy to understand, and it made a lot of sense to me. And it really got me on the path to investing in real estate, which is the reason why we ended up buying a commercial office building. It was because I was wanting to get deeper into real estate. I had already had one residential rental property in place, and then that was the next move. Okay, let's get a commercial office space so that the business can pay the rent and pay down the mortgage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that one had a really big, profound impact on me. And I just liked his style of writing.
You mentioned you liked reading about history, and I was sitting here and I was like, I've never been into history, but I will tell you, as an adult and traveling around the world, I absolutely love learning about history in person. It's so much better than reading about it. And I
Yeah.
had this idea, and I was like, you know what? I was like, they need to just start like field trips during the summer and teaching kids history in real life versus just
Yes.
being in a classroom and reading a book.
Yeah, I agree. It would be so impactful and beneficial to people for a whole host of reasons. One, being able to understand another culture, because that's where, when there's ignorance, that's where fear stems from, which leads to hate and so forth. If people could just be immersed and interact with another culture, then they can have a basis of understanding of who they truly are and what their story is. I totally agree.
I went to Panama 6 years ago and went to the Panama Canal, and it was so amazing. And I just stood there and you can just watch the locks, everything locking and the boats coming
Mm.
in. And I was like, I remember learning about this some grade, I don't know, and I wasn't too interested. I was like immersed into it. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, I bet. I
Oh
bet.
man.
Yeah. Because, yeah, I mean, Panama Canal, like for me, it's, oh, yeah, okay, interesting, cool. Yeah, whatever. But I've never been there, but if I was to be there and see it like you just described, I'm sure I'd have such a deeper appreciation for
You have to be, you have to really love history to read about it and love reading
it.
about it.
Yeah,
Man.
I did. Yeah.
So, Craig, I want to ask you, you have had, it sounds like an amazing journey. You've had some great accomplishments. Your business is successful. You've been on this INC 5,000 list for 5 years, and it seems like you have a lot of great things coming down the road. So, I would imagine that you've had some great encounters and experiences around leadership. So I would love to know one lesson that you've learned on your leadership journey that would help someone else who is an emerging leader or a current leader.
Yeah, it's interesting. Really building a company from the ground up and adding people over time. Yeah, you learn a lot from your mistakes. There was times that I made some staff members not feel good about their work just based on some decisions that I made. And yeah, you look back, oh wow, that was a mistake. I won't do that again. Yeah, sometimes that's just really the best way to learn is from your mistakes. And there's other times where it's just being too tolerant also. So there's this balance, a fine balance line there where sometimes you really need to make some tough decisions. But as long as keeping in mind of having much more of a heart-centered approach to leadership, I think it really goes a long way into retaining employees. A lot of people will really work harder for you and appreciate you if you demonstrate that you truly have concern and care for their own personal development, not only professional development, but personal development, and as a human being. Over the years, I had a natural kindness to me. To me, it was more of learning how to not be taken advantage of, and those were the lessons that I had to learn. But there was a lot of mentors that I was fortunate enough to come across my path, and that provided a variety of leadership examples. I have a good example. This one particular gentleman, he was a client, but then he came on and became a consultant for us, consulting us on developing our company, and he became a mentor for me. And there was one time when I was working on a project for him, and one of my developers had written some poor code, and the website wasn't working properly. And as I was talking to him, I was explaining what was going on and what happened. And I mentioned, yeah, my developer, blah, 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 did this. And yeah, it's not really well. And he just unloaded on me for a good 10 minutes, which felt like an hour. Because when he would get mad, it was interesting, put it that way. He would really go off in a big bad way. And essentially his message was like, hey, yeah, don't blame your employee. It's your fault. You're accountable. You're the leader, aren't you? You're the owner of the company. You're the CEO. You're the leader. Why aren't you being accountable? You're accountable. It's your responsibility. And yeah, that was a big lesson for me. Yeah, he's right. Even you can't be everywhere at once, but there's a lot of things that you have to do as a leader to set up systems and processes and oversight and put other people in place to provide oversight. And at the end of the day, we're all humans and there's going to be mistakes, but you have to be accountable for it and then make it right. And that goes a long way with clients.
I absolutely love that. And I think that's super important for everyone who's listening. If you're in that position and you have a team and you're a leader, of course, we can't control someone else's actions, but we have to make sure that we're equipping people with the correct training and tools and development. And
Yes.
it's one of the reasons, I wanted to start this podcast and have conversations and really just get people thinking. Leadership development is so important. And even outside of leadership development, just developing your employees and making sure that they understand, to do the right thing. Now, will they always do the right thing? Probably not. But we as leaders have to be accountable for our people and say, I'm sorry that this happened, or not really shift the blame to that person. So that's a very great story, and I appreciate you sharing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and there's actually another good example too, because you mentioned about the training and their development. That's, as a leader, it's so critical for you to do that, because if you don't, then how are you ever going to let go and trust, and so that you can scale, right? If you're always having to be, oh no, I'll take care of that. Oh no, I'll take care of that. One of my staff members, one day I said, okay, you're going to present today in a pitch to a potential client prospect. He's what? Oh, okay. And he had never done it before. And he did it, and he was nervous, and he did it. And then I kept putting him in those situations. Over time, he got so good at it. He was the best presenter in the company. And I remember this one presentation we did. He just floored everybody that was on the client side. They actually called me like an hour later, two of them separately, saying, wow, that was the best presentation we've ever seen. And this was like one of the largest real estate companies in the country, actually. And I was just to me, that brings so much joy when you're able to help someone grow and then you get to witness them blossom like that. It's just really fulfilling and fantastic.
Wow. I definitely appreciate you. We get double nuggets here. But no, some great information to share with those who are listening. I know we are both passionate about leadership and leadership development. And I mentioned earlier, there are some various things that I do to help people with their leadership development. And I have an approach that I use around heart-centered leadership. I would love to know your take on that or what approaches that you are taking.
Sure. For me, heart-centered leadership is really the way moving forward in the 21st century. You know, the old school leading by fear just isn't going to work. People aren't going to stick around. There's too many opportunities and options for people out there to choose from. So something that I advocate, I just naturally was that way. But I was very challenged at one point, right around 2014, just trying to balance the business with the demands of employees, clients, vendors, also family life. I really found myself not really myself. I was off-centered, out of balance with myself. And I was fortunate enough to come across this gentleman who practiced Chinese medical Qigong. A friend referred me to him. I went to him, had a session with him, had an amazing experience. Russ Anderson is his name. And I went to see him once a month for 6 months. And at the end of the 6 months, I felt so much more centered and balanced. And then he actually asked me at that time, do you want to learn how to do this? I said, yes, absolutely. So that's actually, I started studying Chinese medical Qigong in 2015, 9 years ago, this month actually. And it really helped me maintain that sense of balance. And to take that heart-centered leadership approach, you need to be in balance with yourself and to be centered so that you can remain calm and not have that short fuse when the pressures come on, because the pressures still come. It's just now with the Qigong practice, I was better equipped to manage through all those pressures and demands of running a company.
Now, Qigong practice, it's something I know that it's new to me. I'm sure our listeners are tuning in, probably Googling it right now. What would you say, or if you can recommend like a source of reference for anyone who wanted to look more into it?
Sure. So Qigong is an energetic practice. Cultures from around the world have their various forms of working with energy. Like yoga, for example, yeah, it really works with energy. It's the integration of mind, body, and breath. So what Qigong is and yoga is very similar. There is like some associations, some Qigong associations, like the National Institute of Qigong, I believe it's called. If you just Google it, Qigong associations, Chinese energy medicine, or Chinese medical Qigong. And Qigong is normally spelled with a Q, Qigong, and which literally just means energy skill. It's the skill of working with energy, because we have a physical anatomy, we also have an energetic anatomy. And that's how our emotions can get all out of whack when we don't have our energetic anatomy in alignment with our center, our heart center, actually.
Thank you for the spelling because I went on to Google it and I saw it spelled with a Q. When you said yoga, I was like, okay, that definitely makes sense because everyone can be in tune with what yoga is.
Yeah, so it's similar, but it's a lot more simple than yoga. It's very similar looking to Tai Chi, actually. Tai Chi just has a lot of the martial application movements to it, where Qigong there's martial Qigong, which I had studied when I was studying Chinese Kung Fu, but the movements for the medical Qigong and spiritual Qigong, for the most part, they're very simple and looks like Tai Chi.
Interesting. I know that this is going to be a rabbit hole for me. I'll be looking into this all night.
If you ever have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Craig, I appreciate you so much. I know that you have been very transparent. You've shared some ups and downs around entrepreneurship, some of the amazing things that you are doing. I know we are getting ready to close out the show, so I'd love to ask if there are any last words or nuggets that you have for listeners.
Yeah, I think really, if someone's thinking about going into business for themselves, really asking that question, why? Is it just to make money? If that's really it, you're going to have a pretty tough go at it, most likely. You really need to have a passion of some sort and base it on that. If you really have a passion, you can figure out something, and maybe it's combining two passions like I did in the early days. I combined my passion for music because I was a musician and my passion for technology and created something new. So if you have that passion in whatever endeavor you're seeking to embark on, then work isn't really going to feel like work for you. And that's where it starts. And then that's where you can start building on those 5 elements that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, I'd say that's a good piece of advice for those early on. And those that are already in it, yeah, maybe there's an aspect of those 5 elements they need to develop further, like faith. Maybe they're in a burnout. Maybe they need to do something a little different to reignite that passion that may have diminished over time. Yeah, there's just different situations for different people, but yeah, that passion's a big one.
It definitely is. You have to be passionate about some of these different things and whatever you'd like to do in your journey, whether if it's entrepreneurship or if it's working a 9 to 5. I know so many people will be interested to hear more from you and maybe even work with you. So where can listeners find you online?
So a great place to start is my website, which is c2pro.io. So that's the letter C and then squared spelled out pro.io. Has some background information. You can fill out a form on there to contact me. It has my 3 areas of focus, which is leadership development, brand development, and marketing communications. And I also have a category for energetic practices because I have this passion for energy medicine and Qigong that I'm wanting to work into the business world because it's a big game changer for me. So that, again, I'm combining 2 passions here and to create something new. So that's a great place to start. LinkedIn is another great spot. So my name is just LinkedIn/in/Craig Cooke. I was fortunate enough to get that early on. I'm also on Instagram, Craig Cooke, Twitter, Craig Cooke. I'm on TikTok too. I think it's c2.777 or something like that. But LinkedIn and my website are the best places to start. And I'm happy to speak with anyone that has any questions about how to work with me. Obviously, my book is available on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle format. And if someone just wants to hear what I have to say, that's a great place to start too.
And all of those links, we will add those in the show notes. Again, appreciate you coming on and being a guest and sharing nuggets with us. And until next time.
Thank you for tuning into another inspiring episode of Leading Beyond Limits. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more from our incredible guests, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. And if you have a remarkable leader in mind who you'd like to hear on our show or any questions and comments, feel free to reach out to us. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Remember, leadership knows no bounds, and with the right insights and determination, you too can lead beyond limits. Until next time, keep reaching for the stars and leading with purpose.